Okay, this is it. The end of Esperanza Rising. We're on the last chapter called Grapes, and this is the last part of the chapter. A few days before her birthday, Esperanza begged Miguel to drive her to the foothills before sunrise. There was something she wanted to do. She woke in the dark and tiptoed from the cabin. They followed the dirt road that headed east and parked where they could go no farther. In the gray light, they could see a small footpath to a plateau. When they got to the top, Esperanza looked out over the valley. The cool, almost morning air filled her senses. Below, she could see the white roofs of the cabins in straight rows, the fields beginning to take form, and over the eastern mountains a hopeful brightening. She bent over and touched the grass. It was cool but dry. She lay down on her stomach and patted the ground next to her. Miguel, did you know that if you lie on the ground and stay very still, you can feel the earth's heart beating? He looked at her skeptically. She patted the ground again. Then he lay down as she was, facing her. Will this happen soon, Esperanza? Okay, here I go with the Spanish sentence. Bear with me. Aguantate tantito y la fruta caerá en tu mano. Wait a little while, and the fruit will fall into your hand. He smiled and nodded. They were still. She watched Miguel watching her, and then she felt it, beginning softly, a gentle thumping, repeating itself, then stronger. She heard it too. Shoomp, 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 the earth's heartbeat, just like she had felt it in that day with Papa. Miguel smiled, and she knew that he felt it too. The sun peeked over the rim of a distant ridge, bursting the dawn onto the waiting fields. She felt its warmth rushing over her and turned on her back and faced the sky, staring into the clouds, now tinged with pink and orange. As the sun rose, Esperanza began to feel as if she rose with it, floating again, like that day on the mountain, when she first arrived in the valley. She closed her eyes, and this time she did not careen out of control. Instead, she glided above the earth, unafraid. She let herself be lifted into the sky, and she knew that she would not slip away. She knew that she would never lose Papa or El Rancho de las Rosas or Abuelita or Mama, no matter what happened. It was as Carmen, the egg woman, had said on the train. She had her family, a garden full of roses, her faith, and the memories of those who had gone before her. But now she had even more than that, and she carried her up on the wings of the phoenix. She roared with the anticipation of dreams that she never knew she could have, of learning English, of supporting her family, of someday buying a tiny house. Miguel had been right about never giving up, and she had been right too about rising above those who held them down. She hovered high above the valley, its basin surrounded by the mountains. She swooped over Papa's rose blooms, buoyed by rose hips that remembered all the beauty they had seen. She waved at Isabel and Abuelita walking barefoot in the vineyards, wearing grapevine wreaths in their hair. She saw Mama sitting on a blanket, a cacophony of color that covered an acre in the zigzag rows. She saw Marta and her mother walking in an almond grove holding hands. Then she flew over a river, a thrusting torrent that cut through the mountains. And there in the middle of the wilderness was a girl in a blue silk dress and a boy with his hair slicked down, eating mangoes on a stick, carved to look like exotic flowers, sitting on a grassy bank on the same side of the river. So while she's in this dreamlike state, she's remembering her and Miguel as children sitting and eating the mangoes, but now they're equal. They're on the same side of the river. Esperanza reached for Miguel's hand and found it, and even though her mind was soaring to infinite possibilities, his touch held her heart to the earth. Okay, here's some more Spanish, and I'm sorry for not saying it correctly. Estas son las manitas que tentaba el rey David. A las muchachas bonitas se las cantamos aquí. Despierta, mi bien, despierta. Mira que ya amaneció. Ya los pajaritos cantan, la luna ya se metió, which means, these are the morning songs when King David used to sing. To all the pretty girls, we sing them here to you. Awake, my beloved, awake. See, it is already dawn. The birds are already singing. The moon has already gone. On the morning of her birthday, Esperanza heard the voices coming from outside her window. She could pick out Miguel's, Alfonso's, and Juan's. She sat up in bed and listened, and smiled. Esperanza lifted the curtain. Isabel came over to her bed and looked out with her, clutching her doll. They both blew kisses to the men who sang the birthday song. Then Esperanza waved them inside, not to open gifts, but because she could already smell coffee coming from the kitchen. They gathered for breakfast, Mama and Abuelita, Hortensia and Alfonso, Josefina and Juan, the babies and Isabel. Irene and Melina came too with their family, and Miguel. It wasn't exactly like the birthdays of her past, but it would still be a celebration, under the mulberry and chinaberry trees with newborn rosebuds from Papa's garden. Although there were no papayas, there were cantaloupe, lime, and coconut salad. And machacha burritos, topped with lots of laughter and teasing. At the end of the meal, Josefina brought out a flan de almendras, Esperanza's favorites, and they sang the birthday song to her again. Isabel sat next to Abuelita at the wooden table. They each held crochet hooks and a skein of yarn. Now watch, Isabel. 10 stitches up to the top of the mountain. Abuelita demonstrated, and Isabel carefully copied her movements. The needle rocked awkwardly, and at the end of her beginning rows, Isabel held up her work to show Esperanza. Mine is all crooked. Esperanza smiled and reached over and gently pulled the yarn, unraveling the uneven stitches. Then she looked into Isabel's trusting eyes and said, "Do not ever be afraid to start over." Okay, so that is the end of this chapter. If you actually have a copy of this book, there is an author's note where she talks about her grandmother and the crocheting and how she came to the United States from Mexico. There is also back here questions and answers with the author, and how to make your own Jamaica flower punch, how to make a yarn doll, and more of the familiar sayings, the proverbs that we talked about at the beginning. So the challenge for today is find out something from your family. Find out something where they came from. Everybody who lives in the United States, our families came here as immigrants, except for the Native Americans. So regardless of what your heritage is, your family was an immigrant. So ask your parents and your grandparents and try to find out, where did your family come from? Did they have lots of mountains and valleys to climb in order to give you the life that you have today? I've really enjoyed sharing this book with you guys, and I had never read it, and I think it was amazing. So this is now the end. Thank you. Bye-bye.